50 years ago, a British Prime Minister launched a controversial war in the Middle East that was to divide public opinion. For Anthony Eden, at stake was oil, British influence in the Arab world, and the battle to maintain domination over the jugular vein of empire, the Suez Canal.
Our quarrel is not with Egypt, still less with the Arab world. It is with Colonel Nasser. He's not a man who can be trusted to keep an agreement.
Nasser was a beacon for the Arab world. He was a natural leader and he had charisma. He was a god.
For Egyptian President Gamal Abdel Nasser, it was a fight for independence.
Well, the meaning of Suez is that there is an end to the methods of the 19th century.
The breakdown of trust between these two leaders was to mark the start of the crisis.
It's a Shakespearean tale of a politician with lots and lots of good qualities, one fatal flaw. He wanted to show that he was a real tough, strong leader. And look what happened.
There's been an act of aggression against us. We need to respond forcefully and immediately.
As Foreign Secretary in the early 1950s, it fell to Anthony Eden to deal with the emerging crisis in Egypt. Eden was the archetypal boy's own hero. He'd won the Military Cross in the First World War and had intelligence and dashing good looks.
He was the very image of the cultivated, aristocratic diplomat. He was also extremely handsome. So he had a certain Hollywood quality, a sort of star quality.
Eden had an impeccable record in international diplomacy. He served in Churchill's cabinet throughout the Second World War and had famously resigned over Neville Chamberlain's appeasement of Hitler.
He disseminated an air of sort of Edwardian courtesy and ease, which was actually rather deceptive. He had got a very good degree in Oriental Studies at Oxford. He was one of that generation who liked to pretend to be perhaps working less hard than they really were.
Eden was so extraordinarily attractive to women. I was struck dumb by the glamour and good looks and elegance of Anthony Eden. I think women fell head over heels in love with Anthony Eden, inevitably.
He would today have been called a smoothie.
In the early 1950s, Cold War tensions were breeding competition and paranoia between East and West. Key to the struggle was the Middle East. Britain was still the dominant power there, and its most important asset was the Suez Canal. The canal was Britain's lifeline for a continual supply of oil and international trade. Over 100 miles cut through the Egyptian desert, from the Mediterranean to the Indian Ocean.
It felt like the kind of mother nucleus of British interests and bases in the Middle East. I mean, I first saw it going through it in a troopship in 1944 or something on the way to India, and I thought it was tremendously glamorous. 3-funnel liner apparently going through the desert.
Owned by Britain and France, the canal was policed by 80,000 British troops, the largest military base in the world. It was emblematic of the empire that was rapidly waning.
Mad dogs and Englishmen go out in the midday sun.
But in Egypt, after 70 years of military occupation, the British were no longer welcome.
During this time, nobody, no Egyptian, can go to the canal zone without a permission from the British authorities. It was very painful for us. These events pushed us to join the resistance at the canal zone.
At that time, we didn't know we were arrogant young 18-year-olds. We believed we were in the right and they were the wrong, and they were the wog, as we called them. They were wogs, and they were nothing.
المستعمر تحت أي صورة من الصور بحكم وجوده في أي بلد مستعمرة مبقاش مرغوب فيه.
Occupation leads to conflict.
على أساس إنه ده محتل، والمحتل حتى لو ما كانش الحكومة بتاعته بتصرف.
Even if the occupying power shows restraints, the occupying soldiers are human, and sometimes their behavior is not exemplary.
غير كريمة.
I actually saw British troops in Ismailia kicking a little young shoeshine boy across the road, you know, like football. They hated us. They would shout out to us, "Come over here and we'll cut your throat."
There was a major in the intelligence corps. He was abducted, and suddenly his body was one night was just dumped in the Sweetwater Canal, and they'd cut off all his badges of rank. He'd been badly mutilated, which was unsettling.
We are not terrorists, but they came to our country and beat us up. We are hot-blooded people, and we could never accept that. So we attacked them.
It escalated so quickly that it caught everybody by surprise. We went in 2 months, 3 months from a peaceful situation to almost a wartime footing.
A young colonel in the Egyptian army, Gamal Abdel Nasser, was ready to take advantage of this groundswell of unrest. He had plans for a new and independent Egypt, and ultimately a dream of Arab nationalism.
He was a politician, a real politician, and a politician with a view, a political, economic, social view, global view.
Because he came from a lower middle class Egyptian family, traditional family from one of the towns in the Delta, and really the military was his path to something beyond that. But he also obviously acquired very good command of English along the way. He was self-educated, and he was obviously a deep thinker. Pondered the problems of Egypt and was anxious to do something about them.
Nasser set up a clandestine group called the Free Officers, whose primary aim was to overthrow the corrupt Egyptian government and then force out the British. Egypt was in turmoil. Many Egyptians, even members of the police, were now joining the growing resistance movement against the British. This was a serious challenge to British control.
Near Abbaswar, men of the 16th Independent Parachute Brigade, in a lightning raid, sealed off 2 villages from which Egyptian guerrillas had bombed and sniped our men.
We used to inform the resistance fighters about the location of the British forces in order to attack them. We became a thorn in the side of the British, and they wanted to get rid of this pain.
By January 1952, the attacks on British troops in the Suez Canal zone had escalated. 30 had been killed and 69 wounded. In the face of such resistance, Foreign Secretary Anthony Eden called for decisive action.
Dear Prime Minister, the situation in the Canal Zone has deteriorated seriously in the last few days. General Erskine has decided that he must now exercise the authority already given him and disarm the auxiliary police in Ismailia. There'll be repercussions, of course, but what choice do we have? Can't go on. I have discussed the situation this evening with the Chiefs of Staff, and I have suggested, no better make that we have agreed, to proceed with Operation Eagle first thing tomorrow morning. That's all. Mark it immediate.